A few weeks ago, Retroid released their latest handheld, a sleek clamshell they've dubbed the Retroid Pocket Flip. As a huge fan of clamshell handhelds like the DS, Game Boy Advance SP, and the massive NVIDIA Shield, I jumped on the chance to get the device in hand and see if there were any substance to such a fresh design. Well, it arrived about a week ago, and ever since, I've been throwing a ton of different tasks at it to see where it succeeds and where it stumbles hard. And I think there's plenty to like here, as long as you manage your expectations. First off, it feels mandatory to start by saying the guts of the Flip are about the same as the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus before it. It's the same processor, same 720p-ish display, same 4GB of DRAM, and same 128GB of eMMC storage, with an extra slot for expansion via microSD card. Considering how favorable much of the 3 Plus's coverage was, that's not entirely terrible though. The core difference here is that they shifted the display from between the buttons to above the buttons. It sounds kinda minor on paper, but as anyone who's used both an OG Game Boy Advance and a Game Boy Advance SP would know, shifting the display location changes how you might comfortably hold a handheld, and how the device feels to hold just in general. The decision to house that shifted display in a clamshell also has a ton of downstream consequences for overall design. They swapped out the half-height sticks with circle pads to avoid interference with the display. While I don't have a 3 Plus personally, from the website they also appear to have swapped out some of the face buttons and D-pads with different components and squished the stacked shoulder trigger buttons just a tiny bit closer. Since they didn't need to cram the display tech into the main body, they even slightly increased the size of the battery from 4,500 mAh to 5,000 mAh and included a fan for extra cooling. All the while, the device is overall denser with a shorter width and slightly taller height, while also being just a tad bit more pocketable since all the buttons are now protected underneath the display. It's a ton of interesting decisions that add up to quite the different experience for this device. But the main question is, do those changes still leave a great handheld that I'd recommend someone to buy? And, well, maybe. I think the litmus test for most people is whether or not they can get past the circle pads. If you want a comparison point, pull out a 3DS and see how much you like that pad. The Flip's pads are a small step above that feel. Both pads have a tiny bit more resistance than Nintendo's implementation, and the rubberized stick caps go a long way toward allowing my thumb to maintain grip during fine movements, which is still something my 3DS's pads have troubles with. While I'd still generally prefer at least half-height sticks above a circle pad, it's obvious Retroid couldn't have done this any differently without going the route of the NVIDIA Shield's recessed sticks and much chunkier design. Even still, I'm surprised how much I actually like these pads, beyond they're just better than nothing. If anything, they've added to the general balanced feel of the device. Just know that if you frequently need L3 and R3 button presses for any game, you might want to remap them to M1 and M2 if you can. I haven't had any problems actually triggering those button presses with either pad, but there's no real tactile feedback, which can be a bit awkward. As for the remaining buttons on this device, everything's a solid like B or B+ in my book. I prefer clickier buttons on consoles in general, and the face buttons here feel just a tad bit too stiff and mushy. I don't entirely hate them though, and they have loosened up a bit since I've used them during the past week. But I'd like to have just a bit less resistance and a bit more tactile feedback overall. Kind of like what they did with the shoulder buttons. Despite being extra small, they feel exceptionally clicky and responsive. The triggers likewise have a good amount of resistance and travel for their size. I dig it. Just copy and paste the feel of those buttons to the face buttons and we'd be solid. My one gripe that's a bit more objective is that I found the display to partially obstruct the shoulder buttons for my larger hands. Holding the Flip as I normally would hold any other handheld, I can't quite fully cover the shoulder buttons with my fingers while the display is extended. There's just not enough room for me. I kinda wish Retroid had borrowed a bit from Nintendo here and set the hinge on top of the main body instead of slightly embedding it. Sure, it might add a millimeter or two to the overall height, but it'd be very much worth it for the extra comfort. In general, beyond a few minor gripes, the buttons and pads do feel pretty good. I think Retroid did a great job for their first clamshell, but they clearly still have some room to grow on a device with this form factor. Okay, nice feeling buttons, we're off to a great start here. Let's move on to what you'd actually play on this device. Obviously, most people are going to buy a device like the Retroid Pocket Flip for emulation, and there's a lot to like on that front. Retroid's front end is mostly intuitive to set up and simple to navigate after a bit of tinkering. Although some systems, like GameCube, didn't want to launch from Retroid's interface, and I haven't found any way to add additional consoles not in their predefined lists, like PS Vita. It's not a huge deal breaker, because of reasons that you'll soon see, but it's a small annoyance that comes at the cost of customizability, as is the fact that there's no app drawer in Retroid's flavor of Android 11, and no physical home button on the system itself. If I'm going to be forced to go into the Android interface for some tasks, I want to be able to hide any irrelevant apps to declutter my view. Then, once I'm done, I want to jump back into the front end without needing to navigate with the touchscreen. While Android's not terrible to navigate on this device, with the keyboard actually feeling okay to use on such a small screen, I want to spend as much time as possible in the more streamlined interface built for controllers. So it's confusing as to why Retroid didn't streamline the entire system a bit more. I know these handhelds are targeted at folks who don't actually mind a little jank, but the overall polish should be better for such an established company. Once I get past my navigation woes, the remaining experience is actually pretty good. I've had no problems loading an emulator, launching a game, and tweaking menu settings, which I've actually had to do for most emulators since touch control overlays are typically enabled by default. Consoles up to PSP, PS1, and N64 run perfectly fine on the Flip. At 2x resolution, Ape Escape on the loose runs at full speed with very little issue via PPSSPP. Spyro 2 runs even better at 3x resolution via DuckStation, although I did need to manually enable analog sticks in the settings to have that enabled for the game. As for N64 emulation, Paper Mario feels great via the standalone Moopin64 Easy app. These systems, and anything less demanding, are generally the core types of systems I'd target with this device. They run great, and are broad enough libraries to give the Flip a niche in my handheld arsenal beyond my analog pocket. If you don't mind leaving out the bottom screen or making that screen exceptionally small, DS and 3DS emulation also work fine. Through the magic of Drastic, New Super Mario Bros. Ran full speed and felt comfortable to swap between 1 and 2 displays. Super Mario 3D Land via Citra MMJ has a few hitches every now and then, but is absolutely playable if you don't mind working around the wonkiness of Citra's screen management. Trying to go beyond these systems to PS Vita, PS2, and GameCube doesn't work out so well. In general, I get the sense that the Mali processor doesn't play well with Vulkan in these apps. Given that Vulkan support is usually the crux of solid performance on Android, that's a bit of a bust. Vita 3K, which is Vulkan dependent, doesn't want to load any games whatsoever. Meanwhile, running Vulkan via Aether SX2 or Dolphin introduces either slowdowns or some general graphical issues. Setting OpenGL gets things running at least, though not as well. Performance in Aether SX2 results in about 50% playback speed in the first few areas of Ratchet & Clank. Something like Mario Kart Double Dash via Dolphin is kinda playable at 80% speed as long as you don't mind muting the music. Luckily, there is a way to get Dolphin games running a bit smoother. The key to getting GameCube games up and running is to actually install Dolphin MMJR. It's a fork on the official Dolphin build that appears to run better on Mali chipsets. Via MMJR, Mario Kart ran at full speed, as did other games I tested like Pokemon Colosseum and Super Mario Sunshine, with only the occasional minor dips to performance in either. The catch is that MMJR is no longer in active development, and builds aren't readily available for download. I actually had to go through an Internet Archive link I found digging around Reddit just to download the app myself. Plus, there's no good way to launch games via Dolphin MMJR from the Retroid front end without a bunch of extra tinkering. All this is to say that the Flip is technically capable of playing GameCube games with the right setup, but for right now, you might not want to buy this device for that sole purpose. These are pretty much the compromises of lower-end processors though, and you can see a ton of that in real time trying to play a more complex Android game like Genshin Impact. Will it run? For sure, at the lowest setting possible. Will it also drain battery faster than you actually want? Also, yes. Well, just going through the long process of initially downloading all the data and updates for Genshin Impact, I saw the battery drop from 50% to 0% in under an hour or so, and also felt the device get fairly warm with the integrated fan not feeling like it's doing a lot more than draining the battery quicker. So yeah, no surprises here. Even when pushing this device a bit, it still yields some general drops in performance compared to other devices and a lot lower battery life as a result. There are some neat features on display here though, like being able to map controls to touch points on the screen for games that don't support controllers yet for some stupid reason. But you're better off sticking to less strenuous tasks on this device, like SNES emulation or, cloud gaming. I actually had a great time playing through the first couple areas of Jedi Fallen Order on Game Pass using the Flip. The controls felt much better than expected for such an involved game, and it was easy enough to forget that I was in the middle of testing the feature in the first place. While I have a ton of other handhelds which allow for more accurate emulation or can emulate more powerful systems, I kinda like the idea of having such a small, pocketable device that doesn't take up a ton of room on my coffee table or bag, and can connect me to Game Pass or allow me to stream from my computer or consoles without any additional fuss. The main downside here is that the display isn't the greatest, even beyond the obvious factor of it being lower resolution. My biggest issue is that the black levels aren't that great. When emulating older consoles, it's kind of a small annoyance in being able to see black bars around the actual game, but while streaming newer games, which have substantially more complex and dynamic lighting, it hinders the experience of any scenes that are intentionally dark. Still, for $160, I can't necessarily complain too much. For a sub $200 retro handheld, the materials and build quality could be a lot worse, and I definitely enjoy what's actually here. If you're someone looking for a handheld and think this might be interesting, there's more than enough performance and comfort packed into the clamshell to be worth a glance. However, it's also worth noting the competition. For $30 more, you could grab an Ein Odin Lite, which is larger and can play both GameCube and PS2 games more consistently. For $10 less, you could also just get a Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, which has the exact same internals as the Flip and benefits from having actual thumbsticks. Heck, even the Anbernic RG353M, which is smaller with similar performance, only costs around $145. Really, choosing the Flip over other handheld options is all about aesthetics. Maybe you actually like the 3DS's circle pads and want to try them on a different machine. Or maybe you're a huge clamshell fan, like me, and really dig the overall design. If so, the Retroid Pocket Flip is pretty much unopposed right now in this price bracket and is, by default, your best option. Otherwise, there are a few other options out there which may be more practical choices, without even getting into buying an old flagship smartphone or modding a PS Vita. As a sucker for this sort of design though, I, of course, hope other handheld developers take a long look at what Retroid's done here and come out with their own versions, hopefully with a more performant chipset. Still, for what it does and what it is, I really dig what Retroid's done with this cool looking handheld. Its compact form factor and clamshell design make it perfect for me to mindlessly toss in a bag as a backup handheld if I don't feel like bringing my chunky Steam Deck with me, but want to play N64 or PS1 games, which my analog Pocket unfortunately can't handle. When viewed that way, the Retroid Pocket Flip hits the sweet spot for me, for price and usability. Those are my thoughts though. I'd love to know yours. Have you been eyeing the Flip since it was announced and are trying to decide if it's right for you? Are you someone who just got their Flip and has thoughts they'd also like to share about it? Let me know down in the comments. And as always, if you found this video helpful or informative, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. If you feel like supporting the channel at all, check out the link in the description to our Ko-fi page or consider becoming a Patreon member for some early access to videos. But best of all, just remember to get subscribed so that you don't miss out on any more handheld video game videos in the future. I'm currently working on writing and editing a couple more videos to follow up on our last video on the PS Vita. If there are any retro handhelds or handheld consoles in the future that you think we should cover, feel free to let me know in the comments or over on Twitter. I'm always keeping an eye out for new cool tech or tech that I missed from the very old past times, so definitely let me know. That's gonna be all for this video though. Until next time, catch you later.